In this episode, we plunge into the dark world of two of the 20th century's most infamous mad scientists. First, we confront Josef Mengele, whose horrific experiments were driven by a perverse obsession with advancing a master race. Next, we examine Shiro Iishi. With a chilling disregard for human life, he used living humans as test subjects in his quest to develop devastating biological weapons. As we analyze their lives through four critical lenses, you'll be drawn into a harrowing examination of their actions. Who was more evil, Mengele or Iishi? The chilling answer is yours to uncover. Josef Mengele was born in 1911 in Günzburg, Germany, into a wealthy family that afforded him a privileged upbringing. Mengele's academic journey was distinguished. He earned a PhD in anthropology and a medical degree. His education was marked by a growing commitment to the Nazi belief that some races were superior to others, leading him to adopt radical views on eugenics and racial purity. Mengele's path to cruelty was paved by his wartime experiences. As a member of the notorious Waffen-SS, Mengele and his Panzer Division participated in the slaughter of thousands of Jews and other innocent civilians as they moved across the Eastern Front. After being wounded in combat, Mengele was reassigned to Auschwitz, the largest concentration camp in Europe. There, he found the ideal environment to validate his racial theories, performing some of the most inhumane experiments ever seen. Shiro Iishi was born in 1892 in Chiyoda-mura, Japan. Like Mengele, Iishi came from a family of means, which facilitated his education and early career. He graduated with a doctorate in microbiology and was deeply influenced by the emerging field of bacteriology. His medical degree and fascination with this field aligned perfectly with Japan's early 20th century ambitions for military and technological dominance, fueling his drive for biological research. By the early 1930s, Iishi proposed the creation of a state-of-the-art facility to spearhead an advanced bacteriological weapons program. He cynically argued that because the Geneva Protocol had banned such weapons, they must be exceptionally destructive and thus warranted the most rigorous research and development. In 1936, his vision materialized as he was appointed head of Unit 731 in Harbin, Manchuria, eastern China. Once at Auschwitz, Mengele quickly became notorious for his ruthless selection process. As prisoners, mostly Jews and Roma, arrived at the camp, they would find Mengele standing at the selection ramp. With a mere flick of his finger, he would decide their fate, whether they would be sent to the gas chambers, forced into labor, or subjected to his brutal medical experiments. Mengele had a particular interest for individuals with hereditary anomalies, such as dwarfism, gigantism, or clubfoot. On these unfortunate subjects, he performed unnecessary amputations, infected them with diseases, and subjected them to electric shocks and high-pressure chambers. But his most coveted subjects, twins. Mengele believed that by studying twins who share nearly identical genetic material, he could uncover the hereditary secrets to propagating the Aryan race. Twin experiments included blood transfusions between siblings, forced inseminations, disease injections, organ swaps, and the injection of chemicals into the eyes in a futile attempt to alter their eye color. Mengele once extracted the eyeballs of two Roma twins with heterochromia, where each eye is a distinct color, and mailed them to a colleague for further examination. He was known to have dozens of eyeballs displayed on his wall, reminiscing a collection of butterflies. He even tried merging two children to create conjoined twins. Mengele opened their bodies and connected their blood vessels and organs before sewing them back together. The twins endured unimaginable pain, crying out in agony for 3 days before ultimately succumbing to their suffering. At Unit 731, Iishi's experiments aimed to investigate the effects of extreme conditions and diseases on the human body. Most of the prisoners were Chinese, with a significant number of Russians and some Koreans. The facility, divided into various sections, each dedicated to a different research program, provided the ideal environment for his horrific ambitions. Infection chambers were sealed environments where prisoners were exposed to pathogens. Diseases like anthrax, plague, and other airborne pathogens would be released and symptoms closely monitored. Pregnant women were given food and water infected with cholera and typhoid to see how these affected both the woman and the unborn child. In the medical ward, vivisections were conducted, where subjects were cut open without anesthesia to examine organ function and the progression of diseases. Other experiments involved frostbite testing, where victims' limbs were submerged in ice-cold water to study the effects of extreme cold on the human body and test the progression of tissue damage. Iishi's cruelty extended far beyond the confines of Unit 731. Water sources across the Chinese mainland were deliberately contaminated with cholera, typhoid, and dysentery, and infected vermin released into civilian areas. And among his preferred methods of mass destruction, plague bombs, devices filled with plague-infected fleas and other pathogens. These bombs were dropped on villages and cities, causing widespread panic and leaving behind a trail of death and disease that stained the land for generations to come. Both Mengele and Iishi displayed an utter contempt for human suffering, though their methods were fundamentally different. Mengele's extreme obsession with his pseudo-scientific theories and an inflated self-image fueled his psychopathic behavior. He perceived himself as pivotal to realizing Nazi objectives, rationalizing his atrocities as necessary for their cause. Viewing himself as part of a superior race, he regarded his victims as inferiors, to be exploited with impunity. The nature of these experiments, the unnecessary pain inflicted, and his perverse delight in seeing others suffer hints at a deeper, possibly sadistic pleasure in controlling and tormenting his subjects. Mengele often seemed kind and playful with his victims, giving children sweets and encouraging them to call him Uncle Mengele. Yet this facade sharply contrasted with his merciless behavior in the lab, heightening the psychological torment for his victims and exposing his disturbing malevolence. Shiro Iishi's personality embodies a chilling blend of arrogance and strategic ruthlessness. He regarded himself as a pioneering force in biological and chemical warfare, above rules and moral constraints, treating ethics and human suffering as mere obstacles to his objectives. During his school years, Iishi was described by classmates as someone who belittled peers while ingratiating himself with superiors, revealing a Machiavellian nature that allowed him to navigate both military and academic hierarchies. While some in the unit experienced revulsion at the horrors they witnessed, Shiro's stoic detachment allowed him to inflict extreme pain without a trace of remorse. The echoes of screams and the sight of mutilated body parts left him unmoved. He would refer to prisoners as marutas, or logs, to show he saw them as below human. During his 20-month tenure at Auschwitz, Mengele orchestrated the deaths of thousands, particularly through his grim selections on the ramp. He conducted experiments on over 1,000 twins, with only about 200 surviving. Those who endured the experiments were often ultimately killed, either by a single injection of chloroform to the heart or by being sent to the gas chambers. Survivors of Mengele's experiments faced severe physical ailments and profound emotional trauma, including PTSD and depression, with scars lasting long after the war. With the help of Nazi sympathizers, Mengele fled Europe for South America, living under various aliases while evading capture. In the 1970s, his son Rolf visited him in Paraguay. During this visit, Mengele denied any involvement in the heinous experiments and even claimed that his actions had saved lives. In the end, he displayed no remorse for his crimes. Despite extensive efforts by various agencies, including the Mossad and renowned Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal, Mengele evaded capture throughout his life. He eventually met his end in 1979 after suffering a stroke while swimming in Brazil. The exact number of individuals killed by Unit 731 and those directly attributable to Iishi remains uncertain, but estimates suggest around 12,000 victims, with tens of thousands more affected by their biological warfare operations. After Japan's surrender in 1945, Iishi faked his own death but was soon caught and handed over to US authorities. He offered to disclose his research in exchange for immunity for himself and his colleagues, a deal accepted by the US to prevent the Soviets from obtaining the information. After the deal, Iishi traveled throughout Japan and continued his medical practice, living the rest of his life in freedom. Shiro Iishi died of laryngeal cancer in 1959 at the age of 67, the same age as Mengele. His death went largely unnoticed, and he never faced justice for the war crimes he committed. While Germany has made efforts to address the atrocities committed by figures like Mengele and other Nazi officials, the Japanese government has largely ignored Shiro Iishi's crimes. Rather than confronting the past, they have opted to overlook his actions, allowing his legacy to fade into obscurity. In the end, both Mengele and Iishi evaded justice, living out their lives unpunished. Their escape mocks our belief in a just world where wrongdoers face retribution. Their actions raise a haunting question: which one left a deeper scar on humanity?